There we go. Hi, I'm Jane Velez Mitchell with Jane Unchained, here with Donnie Moss of TheirTurn.net and Carol Raphael Davis, who is an independent journalist who wrote an incredible story for The Examiner about an atrocity going on in France. Carol, spell it out for us.
Well, on Sunday, there was a bullfight in a town in southern France called Rodillon, which is in southeastern France. They killed 16 bulls on Sunday, stabbing them to death. Many of those bulls were calves that were but a year old. The group Crack Europe, which is the leading anti-bullfighting organization in France, was there with about 600 activists. When they arrived in the town, what they were met with were 250 SWAT team police officers who looked like extras from a RoboCop movie. They had completely encircled the town with barricades that were 12 feet high. They were armed with gas canisters, shields, masks, you name it. And these 600 activists, who were just peaceful activists in T-shirts, who wanted to protest the bullfight and try to stop a massacre, were manhandled, mistreated, body searched, tear gassed at point-blank range. One activist was kicked so hard he broke her leg, her femur. Another activist, bullfighting fans ran into her. It was a chaotic scene with sirens blaring, police brutality, and of course, sadly, the stabbing to death of 16 bulls.
Donnie Moss, the use of police against peaceful activists is absolutely abhorrent, and it appears that this was an all-out war against these animal activists who were simply saying that we don't need to kill these bulls in such a vicious and horrible manner. In fact, we don't need to kill them at all.
I mean, it begs the question, how much money is the government of France willing to spend to protect this dying tradition that is marked by death, ironically? It's amazing to me that France is willing to put up with this, not only economically, but it tarnishes their reputation to have this bloodbath and to have the international spotlight on these atrocities.
Absolutely, Donnie. The European Union subsidizes bullfighting to the tune of 600 million euros per year. And to give you an idea, that's probably around $700 million US dollars. It's important to note that bullfighting is illegal in 90% of French territory. In only a few dozen towns are they allowed under a special judicial exemption that can prove what they call uninterrupted tradition of bullfighting. And that's why this is going on. It is a dying tradition. It is not considered a blood sport. It's not even considered a sport in France. It's actually considered an art. And the matadors, who are killers, are considered artistes. So what we're dealing with is an aging population of people who are digging in their heels, hanging on to this horrendous animal cruelty activity of stabbing bulls to death under this special judicial exemption. It's also important to note that 80% of French citizens throughout France are in favor of abolishing bullfighting entirely in those towns. So all of France is behind the anti-bullfighting movement. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister, Manuel Valls, who is half Spanish, is a bullfighting fan. So these animal cruelty bullfighting organizers have very powerful friends very high up in government, Manuel Valls being the Prime Minister of all of France.
Well, let me say this, that also there is a huge animal rights movement in Spain. Animal Igualdad is huge, and I've worked with them, as well as there is an animal rights movement in France. So I think that it's not just that all the people of Spain are in favor of bullfighting. There are tremendous protests against bullfights in Spain as well, Carol.
Absolutely. And the animal rights movement in Spain and France are really kind of ground zero for the animal rights movement around the world. And I say this because bullfighting is the one form of cruelty to animals that is perpetrated simply for pleasure and fun. There is no lame excuse from the other side like food or clothing or anything at all, not even sport. This is purely just stabbing an animal to death slowly as entertainment. And what is really astounding is at the end of what happened on Sunday, you can hear on the video, you can actually hear the cries of a young calf who is at most 1 year old, crying for his mother, and then as his cries fade out and he dies, you hear the audience clapping politely as if they were at the ballet. This is what is astounding. There's such a horrible, sadistic nature to this art. Quote unquote.
Yeah, it makes me embarrassed to be a member of the human species, frankly. But beyond that, I don't think we should give people a pass who kill animals for leather, because leather is unnecessary. I don't wear leather. I have shoes. I have belts. I don't wear fur. I have coats. I don't wear wool. I have coats. So when we get down to it, Donnie, there is no excuse to use animals. None of us, the three of us here, are all vegans. We're living proof that you don't need to eat them. There's no excuse to kill animals.
And tradition is no excuse to kill animals. And I think what's interesting is that the region of Catalonia, Spain, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, which is where Barcelona is located, has banned bullfighting. It did so several years ago. And tourism is booming in Barcelona. So if the center of the world of bullfighting in Spain can at least one region ban bullfighting, then France can too. And it's just a matter of time. This is unsustainable. Basically the chaotic, riotous atmosphere of this last bullfight, which we saw in these videos, it just spells the end of this. It's unsustainable.
Well, you know,
go ahead.
I was going to say that France is the most visited country in the world. And many American tourists go to Provence, which is in southern France, and the Riviera, not fully understanding that by going to southern France to towns like Nîmes and Arles, which have those ancient Roman ruins that are still being used today for these horrible activities, a lot of people get roped in, tourists. And I think it's important for tourists to call the French embassy in Washington, D.C., and the French consulate in New York and Los Angeles to let them know that they'll be going to Paris, but they certainly won't be visiting the south of France anytime soon, not until this is abolished. And it was abolished in France. It is illegal in 90% of the territory. They just need to remove that special judicial exemption.
Carol, are any of the activists planning on taking legal action, whether asking for an independent investigation into the police brutality, whether filing claims against individual officers?
Yes, Jane, they are. And not only will they be filing charges this week against the police department that was provided for by the central government of France, but they're still in the process of trying to get their day in court for an incident that happened in 2007, where peaceful activists jumped into the ring, chained themselves together to stop the massacre of bulls, and what happened was simply astounding. Hundreds of fans jumped down from the stands, hundreds of them, and beat up on the activists in the middle of the ring. Many of them were seriously injured. 70 of them are pressing charges, and they still haven't had their day in court. That day is coming up, according to the judge, in January 2016, and we'll be there to report on that.
I am absolutely sure that you will be there in force. Dottie?
Carol, what is it about French activists that make them more willing than we are here in the U.S. to put themselves in harm's way? We saw that video of 100 activists storming the arena and conducting, an act of civil disobedience. We don't really do stuff like that here, or rarely. Is there something different about French activists or the French people?
That's such a great question, Donnie. And being a French citizen, French being my first language, and having grown up there, I can tell you this. As a French person, We have revolution in our blood. Don't forget that less than 900 men stormed the Bastille and changed the world and cut off the heads of the people in power. France never forgets that the streets ran with blood, that the Seine was red with blood. And when French people get mad, beware. And French activists are very angry. And the vegan animal rights activist movement in France is growing exponentially. And they are very, very angry right now. And I would say that the French have revolution in their veins, and they are not going to go away. They're going to continue surrounding bullfighting arenas until this horror stops.
Well, all I can say is I don't know a lot of French, but I do know how to say Je suis végétarien, je ne mange pas viande, seulement les légumes et les fruits, s'il vous plaît. And to those who kill the cows, I say mad. And so, thank you. Reporting from New York, and for Carol Raphael Davis in Los Angeles, Jane Unchained. See you next time.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Donnie.